Check 1 2. We are gonna go live. Welcome everybody. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for checking out the stream. This is our weekly office hours where I'm hanging out, answering any questions you might have about MoGraph Mentor, about our classes, about our mentorships, but also just hanging out and looking at various production stuff as well. And today we are going to be looking at some 3D character animation in Cinema 4D. And taking a look at this shot here, how we can, use this rig that we have. And I should mention that this rig here is available at mographmentor.com for free, so you can grab this and mess around with it and, practice your 3D animation skills as well. But I absolutely love character animation. I love 3D character animation. And, it's an incredibly fun part of production. And these rigs here were a collaboration. This is one of the two rigs that's for free on our website between myself and Joey Judkins. And they're really nicely built and really fun and simple. And if you're a beginner to character animation and 3D character animation in Cinema 4D, then these are a really good place to learn. And then the other rig that we have, let's see, is our Bow the Ball rig. And this rig is great if you're a beginner as well, right? Because you can just do simple jumping, simple squash and stretch, really just kind of playing around with, the possibilities here. And, I worked with Joey because he's great at really dialing in some of the controllers here and even building some kind of eye blink controllers as well. So that's all really helpful. And then, things like a squash and stretch that's going to work nicely from the bottom, but still allow you to kind of rotate the character. So that's a really fun one that you can grab for free if you want to mess around with 3D character animation in C4D. But for today, I want to talk about how I'm building out this shot here. And it's kind of Iggy here doing a kickflip, this low camera move. I'm using a wide angle lens. This is like a 12 millimeter lens, so it's this really wide field of view. And we're doing this sweeping shot as he's doing this kickflip and rolling by the camera. So hopefully dynamic and fun. I can imagine this as part of a larger sequence, of him coming past the camera and then the next character kind of flowing in screen right. So I think this shot has gotten to kind of an interesting place, but let's actually talk about just working on a shot like this. If you can get to this animation, it's a very small leap to get to the more complex shot where everything is in motion. So this is the way that I went about it, was just really focusing on this one jump animation. I quickly modeled and textured a little skateboard, and I'm just kind of using a checkered material to just to be able to show some of the rotation on the wheels and that kind of thing, and then putting this right here as well, so that when I build out the kickflip later, there's just a little bit more graphical elements to look at. But the board is pretty simple in terms of being a piece of geometry, and then putting little binding kind of geometry in, and then the wheels. But right, this is in essence just a really simple jump animation, and I did go ahead and animate the wheels to always be just essentially rotating forward. And with this rig, there's a couple of ways to go about really controlling it. One is just the Iggy controller, and if I'm going to need to go under my filter and make sure that everything is turned on so I can see all of these controllers, which are actually splines. So if you have your splines turned off, then you don't see the kind of helpful rigging features. So that's just one note there. So as you can imagine, there's basically kind of a master controller that just moves the entire body. But then there's an Iggy controller. Oops, excuse me. The Iggy controller is kind of the master controller. And the waist controller is really the next biggest one. And the feet are going to follow, but you see, its points of rigging start to pull away, which is okay, because we're going to animate all that together. But really, you get a lot out of the waist. So when I'm doing the shot, I don't even really need to move, at first at least, this base layer. That can always just kind of be at the level of the skateboard. And most of the animation just comes on this controller here. So you can kind of imagine just really needing to dial in that ease in, that kind of jump pattern where it's really fast out, hang at the top, and then come quickly back down. So the waist does a lot of it. And, because Joey rigged us up with these kind of IK legs, you get the bend for free, which is nice, right? So just as you're moving this up and down, the bend is going to happen automatically and the feet won't go past where their controllers are sitting. And so from that, perspective, it's a pretty simple animation to really just focus on that waist. And then once you get a nice up pose here, just, I'll hit 0 and come in and grab these feet controller, and then you can animate those feet after the fact. So really the first issue is just that basic Y jump animation. And then secondary is just going back through and kind of animating the feet into their pose, right? So, from a kind of pose to pose perspective, let me just turn this camera off. There's the first basic pose, which, hopefully is like low and athletic. So we've got him really low. And then, the biggest details with the feet are, I wanted it to feel like this foot was initiating it a little bit. So that foot slides over, and you can see my geometry's intersecting a bit there, and that should be cleaned up. So that foot slides over. And then I start animating, based on this foot controller here, a heel lift. So trying to get him into this really athletic pose, where you're sticking your heel up and you're going to use your toe to kind of build out the force of this kickflip. So the foot slides back as the whole waist axis, that Y-axis is coming down. The foot slides back. The heel lift animation starts, and that can just be animated using the, let me control drag this over, using these little toggle keyframe icons here. So we get a heel lift, and then at this point, the body is already on its way up. So I'm just getting a lot of this for free, where then the feet start to come away with it, and the feet are just following the body, right? Which is kind of more realistic. You get down, you spring, and then quick up. And then it was just a matter of grabbing each of these feet controllers and saying, when he reaches the apex in this Y-axis of this jump, where would the feet need to be? And so that was basically the second pose that I put in, which was about here, which is, and he's even coming a little bit forward off the board, but a pretty natural look, and then just letting this foot, kind of curve out ever so slightly. And especially because I was, really animating this from this flat side view. So we get that Y-axis up, the top feet pose, and then really slams down. And he kind of slams down in an uneven fashion where the left foot really slams the board down, and then the right foot follows just afterwards. And it's really quick. It's just a couple frames. And then in terms of the Y-axis, we need to do that overshoot. So he goes all the way down, comes up, overshoots it, and then settles back in. So kind of overshoot and settle. And so, right, that's just 3 keyframes at the very end in terms of using the waist controller on that Y-axis to do just kind of an overshoot and then a settle. So that's really it in terms of doing the jump. And, I put the skateboard together in a null object and just gave that a little bit of a bounce. Now the next step to really turning that into a kickflip was I actually, this is actually a good example of, upon my initial animation, I actually put the skateboard controller right along the ground plane, which in my mind made sense because I'm thinking, all right, I just want it to come off the ground, just do the same kind of jump spacing, quick up, a little bit of hang, and then come back down. But then when I went to add the rotation, so it goes up in the air, but then it should rotate for a kickflip, well, if I try to rotate from this axis, then obviously that's not going to look right. The axis needs to be dead center. And so the quick fix for that is just to kind of rebuild the hierarchy by adding a null inside of, so if this is the master skateboard null, I need a rotate null. And before I parent, parent anything to this rotate null, this is my chance to choose a new axis, which needs to be the center of the skateboard. And I can see from my 4-panel view that about there is the center. And if I hit H, looks relatively centered there as well. So then I grabbed all of the skateboard elements and threw it inside of this rotate null, and it actually did, and that's another great example of just how frustrating and time-consuming sometimes this can be. Because I had a keyframe on this wheel, which was an errant keyframe on its position, that when I reparented it to a new null, it actually broke it. And so I needed to, I recall here, go to this wheelbase 1 and come to this keyframe here and actually delete it. And then I can grab the deck and the wheel attachments, and let's see, does that break it as well? No, it's still there. Now I do need to go back and fix the rotation on that back wheel. But all that just to say, now I can add another layer of animation to the skateboard with this rotate axis here. So for example, we can take a look at this master skateboard and really just kind of frame by frame this out. And let's say the rotation needs to start right about here. So I'll come to this rotate null, and I want to lay a keyframe, but before I lay a keyframe, I need to make sure that when I click this auto keying or record the active object, right now only position is turned on, and I don't even want to work with the position, so I can turn that off. I just want to work with the rotation, so I want to turn rotation on. Then I'm going to set a keyframe right about here. Then I'm actually just going to turn on auto keying, which is going to create this red border around the viewport, which tells me that if I now, because this already has one keyframe, if I move this at all, it's going to add a new keyframe. Now we know for this animation it needs to go a full 360 degrees. And so we can go to this very last frame here, and let's just rotate it 360 degrees, and it should automatically lay a keyframe. And so now we've added that little bit of rotation. I can turn off auto keying. And when I did it the first time and I see it again, there can be some issues in terms of needing to adjust your animation, adjusting the feet, where you're going to get more overlap, like right here. Yep. So a little bit of intersection there, a little bit there. So then I did have to go through and just kind of slightly retime the foot controllers. But for the most part, that's how I built that part of the shot. Then from here, I really need to create a new rig that controls both the full rig, the 3D character rig, and the skateboard as well, because I've been, to this point, just treating them as separate elements. And so I think I made the board actually go the wrong direction, so that's a great example. If I come back to this rotate, now to get to this exact view, I'm using the standard layout. So here under customization, there is this layouts tab, and you can go to the animate layout, or you can just stay in the standard and come under window and timeline F curve. There's two options here, dope sheet and F curve. It literally doesn't matter which one you choose when you're creating a new panel, because you can always toggle between those modes in the panel anyway. Then I can grab these three yellow, white lines and dock it there. I just generally like the standard layout, and just when I'm doing animation, adding the timeline panel here. Now, if I hit H, it's gonna frame up whatever I have selected here. I really just wanna come under rotate. And as I said, I think I made this go the wrong direction. Yeah, I literally flipped it the wrong direction. So one way to fix that is literally just to grab this here and just take it to about negative 360 degrees in the other direction. And I can come here and really dial that value in negative 360. So now when I watch that animation back, it's going to flip the other way. Or did I do it wrong again? Is it actually the other direction? Maybe I had it right. No. Well, you can tell I'm not a skateboarder. Let's see. Let me do it the other direction. Yeah, it's got to be more like that. So, okay, let me take a look at the comments here. I don't know much about C4D. I really appreciate the animation process show. Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for checking it out. How do you guys have any proper courses that teaches these things from basics? So we have courses in 3D modeling and 3D rigging and character modeling and character rigging. So that's, that's one level of it. We don't right now have a 3D character animation specific video training. We are working on that. Hopefully we'll have that soon, but we don't currently have that. It says, also I use R21 version. Hope there isn't a massive difference if you teach with the newer version. When it comes to character animation, the versioning doesn't matter a ton. Certainly there's going to be new features and stuff, but it's always the timeline. And the hard part about character animation is not the software. It's the actual, art of character animation and all the animation principles and those details and all that good stuff. But yeah, we hope to have a little bit more training for you in the future as well. And, I encourage you to just grab these rigs, do a walk cycle, just get that fun little y-axis bounce, and then do your kind of leg poses. That's a fun, easy place to start as well. So let me get back to what we were working on here, which is this basic jump. So let's say we've got that base animation, we've got the skateboard, and we've got Iggy doing his thing. The next thing, as I'm saying, is to kind of create even a new null object that's going to control all of them together. So I'm going to put the skateboard, and you know what I'm going to do? Whenever I'm parenting stuff to nulls, I always like to go to frame 0. And I'm going to grab Iggy and the skateboard and put that into a null object as well. Now I've created a new controller, and anytime you use a null as a controller, you can, let's say something like a star, you can come under this object tab and just actually see those splines. So we can give ourselves a little controller there. So let's bring him backwards, set a keyframe, turn on auto keying, go to the end of the sequence, and just pull him forward. And if we're getting any wonkiness there, we can always go to the 4-panel view. So and you know what? I moved it in the wrong one, didn't I? Let me turn off auto keying and just do it manually. I think I laid the keyframe on the wrong layer. So I need to make sure the null is selected and not another layer. Lay a keyframe. You know what it is. I forgot to turn position back on. So I'm just going to leave position, scale, and rotation on. Lay a keyframe, come forward. Let's go ahead and move him forward. Manually lay another keyframe, just come back a little bit. So now we've got him in motion. Now it doesn't look too good because, let's see, we're getting a really basic ease in, ease out. And that's one thing about Cinema 4D that is a little bit different from other pieces of software, is that by default, everything comes in eased. It's not linear, right? So if we take this X parameter and I select it and I hit Alt or Option L, it's gonna switch it to linear. But by default, everything has the standard ease in, ease out S curve. So I'll make that linear. And let's go ahead and take a look at it again. It looks very different. Now, when you're doing a kickflip, based on the little bit of reference I've seen, it seems like you're going faster into the kick and then you're moving a little slower. So I'm actually going to turn this back into a spline, but kind of customize it and basically see what it looks like. So that's way too fast. And I actually do want this to be pretty linear. I just want to front load some of the speed, not too much, to where it looks like, you know, he's moving a little bit faster into it. And because I'm imagining this as, you know, you're just cutting to this shot, I don't want to see, you know, anything easing from the very beginning. We just want to start with the shot. And so when everything's easing by default, sometimes you do need to adjust that and make sure you're getting exactly what you want. So that looks a little bit better. He's moving pretty quick through the first part of that, and then he's moving slightly slower after he comes back to the ground. So that, I think, is working nicely. Now, the next big piece of the puzzle was the camera movement and trying to get a more dynamic version of this, because it's a cool animation. It's an okay animation, but it would certainly be way cooler if we add animation to the camera as well. So I've got this camera here, and one of the big drivers of what we're seeing, our general field of view, is called focal length. So if I take that to something like 12, he now looks very far away. The camera didn't move, it's just the field of view expanded so much that he shrunk down. But we're going to work with a really wide field of view here because we're going to get a really dynamic, hopefully, look at this shot. And if we just jump back into this comp, basically I was trying to reverse engineer from moments like this where, you know, this is going to look really distorted, which is kind of cool. You know, we're going to see it almost slant away at the edges. And if I quickly turn on a render region, you can kind of see it's just fun to get a low, really wide field of view and then, you know, sweep the camera around whatever your main subject matter is. And then especially right here, when you get really close and you get the front of that board, that should hopefully be kind of a fun shape as well. So let me just kill that and come back to this first version. And so the way I like to go about it is kind of straight ahead. And I'll just always accept that my first version of my camera move is probably going to look a little rough and need to be massaged out. But I'm just going to do it in basically a pose-to-pose fashion. So first question is like, all right, where does the shot start? Let's say we think this is fine. So by the time he's in some awesome pose, I'd love to be, you know, here. So I'll just move right there, lay another keyframe, and then we can start to see, you know, that first movement start to come together. Now, as he progresses, it would be nice to kind of go by him. Whew. But I'm going to have to back off a little bit. And you see I'm already getting way too crazy. And that's okay. Like we said, this might come out a little bit insane, and I'm going to have to smooth some of the timing and the keyframes out a bit. Actually, you know what I like to do sometimes is just come to the end of the animation and then go backwards and set a keyframe, because I know I want to basically go off screen with him. So set a keyframe there, move it to the very end, and then see how we're doing. So it's actually not terrible. And right, it's very pose to pose. So it's like, I just know we want this pose. We want to start out here. It's fun to start really far back because then it's really a fast camera move. It's almost like the cameraman is on its own, his own skateboard or something, just kind of streaming by very quickly. So that's kind of a fun camera move. I mean, that adds so much. Now, like we were just saying, because there's ease in, ease out, I might want to come to the beginning of these curves here and actually just go ahead and make that linear, so the camera move just starts, right? It doesn't ease in, it doesn't work its way up, it's just already moving. And we can see that kind of re-timed it though. That kind of changed the timing ever so slightly. But I think we're still hitting that main kind of key pose in the center. Now, I was choosing to render this in a really graphical, simple style, and I have kind of the classic Cinema 4D, and this whole lighting setup is included in the rig project files, so if you want to take that as well, my little purple box, where basically I do the background and a floor, and I apply a gradient to both of those, and then on the floor, I use a compositing tag and make it into a compositing background. So basically I just end up with one gradient, but it is still an environment in which there can be lights, and then I'm using a sky object, just a default sky object with just a white material. So there's just a white light that the global illumination is just lighting everything kind of from every direction. The reason that it looks like there's any change in value here is that there's just a Fresnel kind of shader that creates this effect. But the lighting is basically really flat. Really not good at all. Like, the lighting could definitely be a lot better, but I like to keep it flat just because it's almost just kind of like 2D with these really, simple shapes. But all that just to say, a fun next step to kind of blend further in is, well, the problem with this setup and like a cool camera move is, as this camera's moving, it's not really going to feel like it's moving because you're just looking at a purple gradient. It'll look like it's moving because you're getting closer to him, but you're not going to feel the full effect. So what I did on this version here was just to take a platonic, this very rock-like base geometry, put it in a cloner, put it in a random effector, and just basically put little boulders, little rocks of various sizes. And then I applied that same gradient material to the cloner object so that, you do get this added element, but it's actually pretty subtle. So if we do a quick render, so right, you just basically get some of the bounce and some of the, the difference in values that it's hitting, but it definitely adds a lot just because it allows you to feel kind of the full speed of the camera move and just orient the space more. And maybe I have too many there. It's a little bit of a work in progress, but basically that setup is super easy. Let me kill the render region. Let me grab a platonic. I'm going to hold down Alt and click the cloner shortcut here. While I have the cloner selected, I'll add a random effector and scale uniform absolute -1. I don't want any Y position, and rotation. There can be some rotation, and then instead of 50, I'm going to take this to something like 5,000 in both X and Z, to really spread those out. Now that, means there's not many in the scene. I'm going to put the gradient on this cloner. And then within the cloner, it's just kind of adding more in the X and Z until you can come up with something that's interesting. And then if you look at it from your top-down view and just grab the cloner object itself, you can kind of cheat this to wherever your camera move is and decide what you think looks good. I mean, it probably doesn't look great to start with, this exact pattern, so I can kind of move this around. Maybe something more mid-level. And then I played with it as well to make sure that he's not rolling over any elements. So we could say, maybe that's an interesting setup. Make sure my whole gradient scheme is actually working correctly. Yeah. So you get a really kind of subtle element. That's one way to go about it. I think, if we just added more scene elements too, maybe it'd be cool to just build out a little skate park, more skate park geometry, or even maybe in like a lined illustration style could be kind of interesting. But let's take a look at how this shot's developing. Yeah, I love that. I mean, if that's just one quick moment and, amongst other in a sequence, that could be a really interesting shot. So let's see, make sure I'm checking out the comments here. I'm going to toggle around a bit and just see. Then what I like to do is take a look at some of the frames in the middle here. I see, a little issue with the geometry there. Getting some weirdness with the skateboard geometry that I'm going to need to fix. And, the other fun part of the animation is then I added a layer of the eyes. So if you just look closely at his eyes, and so you can see here he's doing the kind of squint, but as he is fully in the air, just using the eyelid controller to fully open his eyes, and then let me just get out of the camera. And then you see he does a blink, lands, blinks, and then it's just in a kind of a basic hold where, you see some eyelid, but it's not. Right. So the eyelids start to close a bit when he's kind of mustering up the strength, and then there's the pupil in there as well. So you probably get a little bit of a better look at it here. So this is the eye control rig that I'm referencing here. And so it's really easy to do that kind of animation. The eye rotate, where that's going to stick to the surface, that's really nice. Up, down, tilt, which is really useful. And then each lid on its own. So you can click these little gray circles, and that's going to lay a keyframe. So control click on those two there. You can go forward like 5 frames and lay a keyframe there. And then let's go and take this back to, let's say 75%. Control click more keyframes. And yeah, start to work on a little eye blink. And so, all of character animation is really layers of animation, one thing at a time. Of course, the first question with any shot is the blocking and the main part of the body. But then, yeah, it's so fun, obviously, then to get to dial in little details. Once you get the jump animation done, adding that little secondary animation in terms of the eyes is really a fun way to go about it. So, the big question for Cinema 4D has always been access to rigs. Maya has been the standard for so long, and so there's a whole portion of the internet where there's Maya rigs everywhere. That's not really been the case with Cinema 4D. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to hire Joey and pour some resources and some time into building out some rigs. And so I would just, if you're really into this kind of thing and you want to get better, starting, and this was my own career too, when I took classes at Animation Mentor, the amazing people at Animation Mentor, they start you off with a ball bounce, and then they start you off with basically a ball that has legs, because this is a great place to start. You can get comfortable with the whole workflow of working with a graph editor, working with keys, working with curves as well, these F curves, and get comfortable with that on things that are simple. And so definitely the place to start would probably be this guy here, where you can just do some fun, simple bounce animations. Let's see. Educational purposes. Right, so even just basic squash and stretch bounce kind of stuff, that kind of character moments of just using rotation and eyes to tell a story and think about pacing and think about blocking is a great place to start. And so I definitely encourage you, if you're interested in this kind of thing, I would definitely start with simple rigs like this. And hopefully if you make something cool, tag us. It'd be really cool to see it. Does anybody have any questions or anything like that in relation to MoGraph Mentor or Cinema 4D or any of that good stuff? I'm just going to take a quick sip here. Yeah, and when it comes to animation and ball bounces and this kind of thing, it's really more about animation principles than anything. But if you're like totally new to the graph editor, starting even simpler, just hitting a keyframe and turning on your auto key, making sure all of our position, scale, and rotation is on. And so if you're totally new, just a quick rundown would be that the dope sheet, for whatever reason they call it the dope sheet, the dope sheet is basically just showing you the keys, right? So when you're in After Effects and you're just seeing the keys, that's what they're calling the dope sheet here. So that's this version. And that means, right, when you just need to retime stuff, let's say, oh, we didn't want this to start on frame 0, we want it to start on frame 20. Well, the dope sheet's supposed to give you a quick, easy way, because once you have a scene with a bunch of animated stuff and you're in F-curve mode and you have them all selected, it starts to get a little overwhelming if you just want to do basic retiming, like if you just wanted to move these over. But then you're actually adjusting the curvature as well. So if you want it to be done automatically, right, where it'll just kind of keep it perfect, then the dope sheet is what lets us move the keys around. So because we just did an animation with all of that, and I'll hit H to frame what I have animated here. So because we add position, scale, and rotation, we see we have data for all of those parameters, and we can go through here one by one and see every single one of these, except for scale, because we didn't scale anything. And then the X position. So the 3 rotations and then the X position are really what is animated here. And so like we said, right, when we see this curve, right, it's basically telling us that, the more horizontal a line, the slower it is. The more vertical a line, the faster it is. And so this classic ease in, ease out, so, the lines are horizontal and then they start to get vertical, and the apex of their speed is right in the center, and then it eases out on the other side. Now we can say ease out even longer and then go really, really fast and smash into a wall. So that's what the curve would look like, and we just did that on the position parameter. So that's what we're going to see there. So it's definitely, if it's a totally new concept to you, it can be weird understanding curves, but it's actually really simple. So we could also say, instead of slow out, we want fast out and slow in, because the line is more vertical here, more horizontal here. And so we'll see, it's almost like it's being shot out of a cannon, right? It's moving really, really fast. And just like in After Effects, the motion path spline actually has the spacing chart kind of baked into it. You can see these dots that are showing you the spacing. This is the fast out, goes here, 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 and then, you know, you see it's slowing down and they start to get closer together. In Cinema 4D, it's handy that we actually have this, oops, don't want to adjust that, because we can come into these different panel views, and these are actually live, so we can move these as well. So this is helpful too for just shaping the paths of your animations, that you can just, you know, move these around. Another useful element is that, let's say we have kind of multiple keyframes. We wanted this to curve at the end this direction. It's very often difficult when you're kind of going between keyframes. Like right here, we see this weirdness. That's going to look weird. It's going to look like it went really fast and then slow and then fast again, right? That's not really very smoothed out. So we kind of want to make sure we smooth this out until it doesn't look so crazy. That's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it is to kind of actually move these around, right? If this is actually further out this direction, then I'll see that the spacing might be a little bit more even in there. And let's see. The other thing I like to always do is make sure I don't need more keyframes than I have. But because I just went ahead and laid keyframes there, it added it to the position as well. So you really just have to wrap your mind around this basic idea of, you know, linear or Bezier, and then ease in, ease out, or fast out, or slow out, like whatever you need the shot to be. That's basically it, right? There's really only 3 types of spacing charts when you get down to it: ease in, ease out, fast out, slow out. It's like it's one, you know, it's one of those, and then everything else is combinations of those things. And so, you know, that basic idea is essentially applied to all the elements here. And then, you know, just building up to fun little complex shots where, you know, we're starting really simply and then kind of building up to something more dynamic and more interesting. So yeah, go check those rigs out. Go download those rigs. Let me know if you have any questions about MoGraph Mentor, but that's kind of what I wanted to touch on today with some of this basic character animation. I think it's becoming just way more common to do character animation in Cinema 4D, which is very, very exciting. The tool has basically everything we need. We definitely probably need more rigs. We need a larger community of people building rigs and refining rigs, and then more production artists using it as their primary tool, so that studios can feel like they can successfully do 3D character work using Cinema 4D. I think we're definitely there. There's so many great examples of character animation, especially, you know, stylized, simple stuff. But, you know, Cinema 4D is such a great tool for this kind of work. So thank you all so much for checking out today's office hours. You know, check out mographmentor.com. Feel free to reach out to me, hello@mographmentor.com, if you have any questions about our courses or mentorships or anything like that. And go download these super useful rigs. Our registration is actually open right now. If you are interested in a mentorship, now is the time to sign up if the time's right for you. But you can check these out on our resources page at mographmentor.com. Download those. It's even got this this great little light setup, and you can, use that, repurpose that, all that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Hope you all have an awesome week. Make cool stuff. If you make anything cool with these characters, would absolutely love to see it. Thanks, everybody.